of the second Doctor, I think a big part of me feels like this is Doctor Who a bit more than the first Doctor. And it's a bit weird when you think of it like that, but a lot of what we know from Doctor Who, outside of more surface level stuff, like you could say that the Hartnell era establishes, what Doctor Who should sort of feel like to an extent. We've got a TARDIS, we've got Daleks, we've got Cybermen, we've got companions, we've got a crotchety old man. It all just sort of works. But when we get to Patrick Troughton's era, we have stuff like Unit, more Cybermen, um, Daleks, companions from a multitude of different times and places, along with Unit, the Time Lords. It all just sort of hits a bit differently. And I think it's because the Hartnell era is sort of finding its footing. It was trying to figure, okay, what exactly are we going to do? Well, we want to do like education stuff. We want to teach you about science and history. But then something happens around the Hartnell era where it's sort of like, well, why isn't the Doctor the hero? Because for a while it did feel like, he was supposed to be Ian, as we mentioned before. But then it sort of goes to, well, the Doctor. And then we come to Patrick Troughton, and they play around with that too. Also, Troughton sells regeneration, and this was the deal breaker for the series, I think, because, and I mentioned it in my Jodie Whittaker video when she was first announced, that if Patrick Troughton's acting had been subpar, had the writing been subpar, there would have been no third Doctor. There would have been no other seasons to be lost to time. Yeah, that sucks, but even more to that, Troughton's Doctor is just fun. I mean, well, the first Doctor is very much the authority figure. He's the man in the room. When he speaks, people listen, and if you don't, well, you're kind of an idiot. Troughton doesn't do that. I mean, he is an authority figure. He can be, but that's not his modus operandi. As a matter of fact, he seems a bit more calculating, and a bit more innocent when you look at him, especially in some scenes where he's just running around with like this big coat on, and he feels like he can't quite communicate what he wants to do. Like, oh no, oh Jamie, cough, clearing his throat a bit. He feels a bit like a bumbler. There's a Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keating feel to him, and that sells. That works. That really does help create the idea of the Doctor. And think about it at the time. So if you go by the story, well, we're going to cliff note it here. William Hartnell, he's sick, he's elderly, and he can't do it anymore. So he steps down. He's the one, from what I've been able to gather, is the one that suggested Patrick Troughton take over the role. But think about it then. Okay, we could have just as easily said, well, let's just put a wig on Patrick Troughton, and he'll say he's the Doctor, and he'll act just like William Hartnell. Someone in that room said, well, no, we've got Patrick Troughton. Let's just have him be Patrick Troughton. And boom, there you go. We're killing it then. We're selling. It's great. Troughton's Doctor is definitely one of my favorites. That's because I think, as much as he is a bit of a bumbler, I think a lot of that is intended. A lot of it is intentional to his character. There's also a bit more calculating nature to him. And only a few of the Doctors have been able to do that effectively. I would say the 11th and 7th Doctors, honestly. And maybe the 13th Doctor, Jodie's Doctor, might be going in that direction. I'm not entirely sure yet. We'll have to wait and see. But there is something just very fun about watching Patrick Troughton just walk around a bit as he rubs his hands together and plays with them, plays his flute, runs. God, love this man and his running. Dear God, Patrick Troughton brought running back to Doctor Who. Actually, he didn't bring it back. He brought it too. Before, we just sort of had people moving about a bit. In addition to characters like things like Unit, there were also really very great companions coming in. We had Victoria, Jamie, and Zoe. I think these are three very great companions because they come from such radically different time periods. And this is something that I wish Doctor Who would go back to doing. All of time and space is at your disposal, yet we keep getting people from the same period of time. Okay, let's look at the Pawn and Aster gang here, all right? They're people from, if I recall, Victorian era London, but you've got a Silurian, a Sontaran. The only person that's actually from from the actual time period is Jenny. I mean, it all just works. That should be a TARDIS team. that should. Just traveling with a doctor for that. Granted, it might be a bit much. Maybe you could just do um, Jenny and Vastra, or Jenny and Strax, or Vastra and Strax. That would work too. All of time and space is at your disposal, yet we get the same people of the same time period. There is something very unique about getting companions from different time periods. And the stories themselves, the stories we don't quite get anymore from Doctor Who. Not just stuff in the far future with Base Under Siege stories, which we get some of those every now and then. Stuff like the Mind Robber, which is just going around with a bunch of literary figures. The Doctor meeting Gulliver, Medusa, Rapunzel, D'Artagnan. That's stuff we don't get anymore. And granted, we really only got that in the Second Doctor's era and the First Doctor's era too. But you don't see that as much anymore, and it's a shame. Coming back to the Doctor, he also sorts of leaves more hints as to exactly why he's traveling. The First Doctor implies, hey, we've sort of been exiled, we fled, it's a thing. I stole this, borrowed really. I intend to give it back at some point, someday. Not really. Even the TARDIS called me out on it, and the Doctor's wife. But the Second Doctor implies that, we have, the Time Lords have all this power, all these resources, all this ability to impact real change, and they don't use it. It feels like he has an ideological falling out with the Time Lord Society. And, if you go through the Doctor's life, that is sort of him in a nutshell. There's a really great quote from the Second Doctor.
There are some corners of the universe which have bred the most terrible things. Things which act against everything that we believe in. They must be fought.
This is sort of almost antithetical to the Doctor's behavior, which is like, I'm just a guy traveling around, don't quite know how to fly the TARDIS, but when something's wrong, I'm going to fix it, which is almost a polar opposite of the First Doctor, and I think that was intended. I've always been of the mind that, to some extent, the Doctor's next incarnation sort of states a psychological need that the previous incarnation had. So the First Doctor, is not very hands-on with the situation. The Second Doctor is hands-on. He's more physically active. He's also trying to not appear to be the hero. There's a calculation there. And I can't help but wonder if that's something the First Doctor wanted. Anyway, I would say the Second Doctor's era is it's almost like mandatory watching at this point. Good number of episodes that you should watch, even with a lot of it being sort of lost to time. The Mind Robber, the Doctor meeting literary figures, solving riddles, death traps, it just works. The Invasion and the Web of Fear are unit era stories, really great. A lot of stuff with the companions to do. Tomb of the Cybermen was actually my first Second Doctor story. I just really like it. Also, there's some of the dumbest bad guys ever. You want to see dumb bad guys, watch Tomb of the Cybermen. The Ice Warriors, the appearance of the Ice Warriors. Also a very great appearance from Patrick Troughton in that coat, which seems to have followed him around almost as much as his recorder. And one of my personal favorites, The War Games. And The War Games is an ambitious story. It's hard not to love it just on that level. We've got companions and the Doctor split apart over a 10-episode story. The Time Lords are there. The Doctor, and this is something that New Who should do more of. There's a good part in the Second Doctor's era where there's not much he can do. Like, he can solve it, but he can't fix it. And that falls to other people to do that. And I love that. And the ending of War Games is, to me, it's right up there with the treatment with, the end of Donna's story in the 10th Doctor's era. The Doctor's hand is forced and he has to say goodbye. So, yeah, Second Doctor. Fun, hilarious, plays recorder, great companions. You're doing it. I think you're missing out if you don't give it a watch. So with that in mind, I'll bring this video to close here. If you're new to the Bucket Think Tank, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe. Check out some other videos, and I'll catch you all later. This is the Bucket Think Tank signing off. Thanks for watching, and as always, may your fandom serve you well.
Our lives are different to anybody else's. That's the exciting thing. Nobody in the universe can do what we're doing.